Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to VTT Sip of Science today, where we will be talking about smart and sustainable cities, whether it's a mission possible or actually impossible. My name is Sami Kazi. I'm a research team leader for smart cities and intelligent buildings, and joining me today in this wonderful conversation are my colleagues Peter Ylén, who is a research team leader for smart city impact assessment, and my senior research scientist colleague Pekka Tuominen. So do grab your cup of coffee
Hmm.
and let's get the dialogue going. Um, Now, one of the great things, you hear about a lot these days is carbon neutrality, and everybody's saying, we need to go in and be carbon neutral in the short or longer term. And if we talk about Europe, the target is that by 2050, at least, a majority of cities, if not all, should be carbon neutral. In Finland, some cities are super ambitious and are saying that, well, let's try to get carbon neutral by 2030. And even while this is happening, we also understand, based on different figures, we've noticed that approximately 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions are actually coming from cities. 70% of energy is also being consumed within cities. And the numbers just keep on piling. At the same time, however, we also realize that another 70% of the GDP is also generated in cities. So cities do have an important role to play. And we use different tools at VTT to help people out, to change these numbers. And what we'd like to be talking about today and discussing in a way is that what if suddenly we were able to make cities emission free? What if our cities could actually produce more energy than they would consume and become, let's say, attractive hubs where smart people like yourselves would be thriving along with, of course, companies, because we need to boost their revenues and make sure that they make a big difference to society. So let me just start off with my dialogue by asking my colleagues on some of their views. So Pekka, let's start with you. What do you think we need to do to ensure that we do or we are able to achieve, let's say, carbon neutrality in the next, like in Finland, 10 years, Europe in the next 30 years, globally, maybe something similar. So how do we actually get to carbon neutrality?
Well, I think cities are actually, they do have a key role here, exactly for the reason that you said that 70% of emissions come from cities. And uh, basically, for the whole society, the task is of course similar. I see the city as sort of a mini version of the society. So when you're able to achieve these goals in the city, it's at the same time largely achieved in the society at large. Uh, if you think of the city, you have certain things that have sort of a dominant role regarding emissions. You have the built environment, which is especially pronounced in the Nordic climate because of space heating needs. And this has a really major role. So there we need, on the one hand, to reduce the need for energy, so improving energy efficiency all the time, and on the other hand, make sure that the remaining energy need is covered by benign sources, so renewable sources or non-emitting sources of energy. And this needs to be happening at the same time, not one before the other, but at the same time. Then you have
Yeah.
the transport sector, and there you have a lot of need for decarbonization. And it's cities are actually maybe somewhat easier than the society at large, because most traffic in cities is relatively short distances. So then you can uh, promote walking and cycling, which are beneficial in other ways than just from a climate point of view. You can improve mass transit and public transport, and some remaining traffic there will of course be, but there you can aim for electrification and alternative fuels. And then you have the industry and commerce taking place in the city, and these issues are of course then some things that are specific to the sector, and maybe I won't go too deep to that right now, but each industry has their own way of achieving their goals. For instance, in Finland we have recently heard about maybe world's first and most major steps being taken towards carbon neutral steel making. So Finland has great potential to be a world leader also in this regard. So it's a complex thing. Many things need to take place, and a lot of things are affecting each other. And this is actually where VTT has a role to play, because we are a multidisciplinary organization, and we can help also see what happens over the sectoral boundaries.
One thing we advocate a lot at VTT is that, when somebody talks about a smart city, is it about technology? And for us, it's not just about technology. It's actually about smart people, like, our audience, and of course, some of us also, if I dare call us smart. And, how do we empower these smart people with the right tools and technologies, of course, to make these important informed decisions? And this is where, Peter, I'd like to come to you, that, for decision makers to be able to make short, medium, and long-term impactful decisions, what type of information do they really need?
Well, they need a lot of information, just as Pekka said, that everything affects everything. So it means that if you want to change the world, you can not only do it by regulation and incentives. You have to create new business opportunities. You have to somehow impact consumer behavior. You have to create possibilities for third sector to do things. And if you only do partial things, where you do one thing right, you are not going to succeed it. So you need lots of information that is not conventionally used for making decisions in city level. So if I would make very sort of simple generalizations, then usually cities are interested in, of course, citizens who live there. They know many things about them, and they know their own processes like service creation and education and health. But what they are lacking is the information what businesses are doing and what they need, what kind of things are required for a business ecosystem. And they are lacking information on many things on national level. They have a sort of vague view of what's going to happen, but then when you have to make all these actions into realities, legislation, things like that, these are things that have to be taken into consideration. And you have to take the concept that you do not only need information of current situation, you have to have information on future things that haven't happened yet. So this is kind of essential, that if you only think of current situation, then you are just maintaining the status quo and not thriving for anything new or the new normal. So you need a time horizon to history, to current situation, to future, and then you need holistic view of all these different data sources. And some of them are not formal data, some are mental models and sort of vague concepts. But if you don't take into consideration these, then you are not going to succeed in your goals.
That's interesting, and maybe I'll pose this question to both of you, because one thing which intrigues me a lot and many people talk about, so, in terms of informed decisions and the smart city, so many people have created, let's say, visions of what we call the ideal city. And, is there something called even a one size fits all, at a city level? So, across the world, so every city is the same. Can they follow a similar model? Or for that matter, let's say, even cities in a particular country, can we have this idealized city or this perfect model? One size fits all. So, Pekka, let's take your take on that first, and then Peter, you can follow up.
Well, I'd say that in city development, there actually was, if you briefly think about history, there was this period of time when cities sort of followed this modernist ideal, and it meant largely, if you think of let's say, if I am a little bit caricaturize here, if you think of the typical American city, where areas are separated from each other, you have clearly separated housing areas, clearly separated central areas and industrial areas and so on, and everything is reached by private cars. and life becomes quite compartmentalized. You go to one area to work, and that's the only thing you do there. You go to another area to shop, and that's the only thing you do there. You take your kids to school, which is in another location, and you go to your home and you spend your free time there, and so on. So this was for a long time sort of an ideal type of world, which was created to solve the problems that people saw in the early industrialized period, with lots of congestion and lots of pollution, and people suffering from pollution and too tightly built cities. Well, now the world looks different. We don't have anymore, at least in the Western world, those problems so bad. Actually, this modernist view of the world, where cities have separated functions in different areas, have created new kinds of problems, and it turns out it's actually can create terrible traffic problems. People spend a lot of time moving from one place to another, which is not in the end ideal. You don't want to spend a lot of your life sitting in a car moving from one place to another. And of course, you create traffic with all those problems that come with traffic. And also people tend to it's nice to have a sort of a lively center in the city, or a lively neighborhood around you, where you can go walk to places and stop by in a shop or a cafe or a restaurant, and stop for a haircut. And so actually I'd say that we should keep the nice things about the modernist model also, but take another look at it, and maybe develop cities that are sort of nicer, and that can handle some of these issues that the modernist model brought with it. We have to recognize that not everything that it came with it is good, and once we recognize that, come up with the solutions. And this can be about livelier neighborhoods and livelier centers, and shorter distances, walkable distances, and less need for a car.
Peter, very quickly, what are your thoughts on that? One size fits all. I know you do a lot of work with different processes and tools at VTT, so I'm sure you have some insights on that.
Yeah, well, of course, one size doesn't fit all. We all know it from our clothing, for instance. But basically, if you try to introduce something for environment that isn't suited for that, you are not going to succeed. And if you talk of smart and sustainable city, it's very different in Asian capitals as in Nordic countries and United States. So it can be sustainable, it can be smart, but the end thing, what the city is like, is very different in different areas. And if you try to force some ideas from other culture and other situation to another place, it is likely that you will fail. At least you have to modify it somehow. There was one example in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, where they didn't have public transportation in the major capital, and they felt that this is a problem, and they tried to introduce kind of Scandinavian model of introducing buses and traffic, and it was actually a worsening for the people living there, because they were used to motor taxis that take you from one place to another and bypass all these traffic jams, and then you should, if you go to buses, you have to look at timetables, and it only takes you so far, and you cannot get to your home door. So you have to have different solutions in these surroundings, and this is just one example.
And that's brilliant. We just received an online comment, which I think is fantastic. It echoes some things which are very close to my heart personally, and it was actually going to be one of the questions I would lead up to. So the comment we've received, thank you, whoever has sent it, and please do keep on sending comments or questions online. We'd be happy to take them along our conversation. So the comment really is really nice. It says, stop using technology to optimize people for the market. So I think that's a very nice, bold statement. And then it says, start using it to build a better future centered on our pre-digital values of connection, creativity, and respect. And let me throw that to you, Peter. I mean, the way we're helping cities to build these better futures. I know it's not only technology centric, but how can we ensure these pre-digital values of connection, creativity, and respect?
Well, these are the things that are difficult to measure with conventional things. So very often you measure money and transport miles and these kind of things that can be measured. And if you only make decisions based on that and use technology for optimizing these, then you are not going to succeed. So you need all these sort of value creation things and behavior kind of things that are much more difficult to measure and take them into consideration in order to have a city that will create value for all the stakeholders and all the citizens there. And then you have to take all of them together, because whenever you do something that benefits one interest group, then it may cause some problems for others. So you need this holistic view of value creation and earning logistic for different companies and also all these technical factors. And then use technology and modeling and artificial intelligence and you name it to take all of this into consideration. With artificial intelligence, it's always a problem that if you don't have formal data, then there's a possibility that you don't take this into consideration, and then you only get partial solutions. And all of these important things are left out. So this is very key element in doing good decisions.
Pekka, let me come back to you. So, if we combine these elements, I mean, you were previously describing, for example, the buildings, the transport, and everything, because everything is just so intertwined and interconnected. And then we also talk about this value creation and cities being, where people spend most of their time. I mean, they live there. Where do you believe a city should actually be focusing to make all of this happen?
Well, yeah, basically.
I know it's a difficult one.
Yeah, and I think you can't sort of really just concentrate on one thing. And of course, also situations differ. The cities are so different from one another, just as Peter's example is just now revealed. So what I would suggest to any city decision maker is to start with analyzing closely the situation and start from, well, basically two things: from the problems you've recognized that you face, that are the most serious ones, and the things you want to achieve, and then analyze those. And I think that needs out of box thinking, because if you, for example, health issues, if you see them only as health issues, that's a very narrow point of view. If you only think of healthcare, for example, you're only treating the problem. But at the same time, there's so many things in the city that affects actually people's health. The way they move around the city, how much exercise people get daily, what kind of access they have to healthy food, and the environmental issues, your indoor environment, your outdoor environment, pollutants, so on. So it actually, the analysis should be multidisciplinary and cover different things, and that's where VTT has strength, and that's the type of thing we work with. So we can't go to the city decision makers to support them with this kind of multidisciplinary decision making and finding out the unexpected impacts of their decisions. Or if you could find a more efficient way to reach the impacts that you're looking for by thinking outside the box and coming up with a solution that's maybe outside the boundaries of the city's normal activities. Oh, there's so many case examples. Maybe I won't bring up any right now, but is there a second question?
No, but this is really nice. I mean, this is something, I'd like to pick up on from both of you, actually, is because, we've actually had some requests online that do we have any good examples of cities that may have, implemented some measures to achieve such goals?
Well, Peter, would you like to give an example? You have so many of them. It's difficult of choosing.
I know.
Yeah. We have done some cases in Japan and South Korea, as well as in Finland. In Japan, there was a question of how to build a circular economy with certain products and how to make something sort of high value product from waste. And in this case, we sort of helped them to understand what kind of raw materials, rice straws in this case, and construction wood waste and and textile circulation have to be included together, and what's the role of city in creating sort of collection infrastructure that not sort of from business point of view, it was not beneficial for any private sector company, and how to make this public-private thing work, and how to create value from all of that. But then there are similar cases all around the world, and in Turku, we did some cases how to see the value of light rail, and what it's not just a transport case, it's sort of evaluating different future scenarios, and it's a tool for developing the city, not just taking people from one place to another. But there are many. Do you have some other, Pekka?
Well, actually, I could say just a couple of words more about this Turku case, because I think it's very enlightening from the point of view we were just talking about, that if you take sort of the classic view that the way you're used to always analyze things, you might get the too narrow a picture. And the classic view for analyzing this kind of public transport investments is that how many minutes do you save from people's daily trips if you have this new investment? And in the Turku case, it turned out that if you only look at this kind of travel time impacts, the light rail is a terrible investment that will never pay itself back. But when you take this broader view and you include things like how people can now trust that this line will stay there, because rail lines will not be dug up easily. A bus can change its way overnight, but the rail line is there to stay, so people can trust it. And young people who might necessarily not want to own a car or even have a driver's license will be attracted to this city, and from a city selfish point of view, it's really nice to have these young people who have a long career in front of them and who are very good taxpayers and don't consume a lot of services. And you can also, next to a rail line, you can develop much denser new areas than you can in other places. So it opens up possibilities for land use development and new inhabitants, and attracting new inhabitants. And when you have new inhabitants and a constant flow of people along the rail line, that's also an ideal position for companies of different types, services or offices and so on. So there's so many things you can actually attract and build and develop the whole city from different sectors, not just from a traffic point of view. And when you take this broader point of view, and you can actually calculate and assess and approximate how big the impacts will be. And it turns out that when you sum it all up, you have actually a much greater impact. So when you do this kind of approach, when you're considering major developments in the city that have cross-sectoral impacts, you should always take this kind of approach. And we're there to offer the tools and ways how to make it, because in many cases the toolbox is not there yet, and it needs to be developed.
Yeah, we've had some, other interesting comments online. One is a very good reminder, for us that, in cities and spaces where we have smart people who want to co-create and take further actions, a reminder that, don't forget physical activities like, bicycling, walking around. They not only help, let's say, reduce the carbon footprint, but primarily are also very beneficial for society's physical and, most importantly, mental health. We also have another interesting comment. I'll take that perhaps from you, Peter. You've been doing lots of modeling across some different cities in Finland and abroad, of course. And the question is that, in your opinion, and based on your research, which you've been doing for a very long time, I won't talk about ages here, what practical things will happen in the cities of Finland in about 50 years?
Well, there are many things happening in cities in even shorter time. And I would say that the current corona situation will change the cities very rapidly. And ways of working, for instance, traveling, and how companies see if they want to keep the employees within one place or if they are productive elsewhere, which will cause things in traffic and other places, some certain effects. And what kind of things are happening? Well, future is very open, and I think that all kinds of crises and situations will boost up a better world in the long run. So this means that it's like distillation column. certain things get to the top. But sort of mobility as a service will come. Digitalization is very strong. Disruption of work. There will be a lot of people who are they have a wide variety of employee portfolio, and they are working for several companies, putting their expertise there. Automation is coming. Robots are coming in many places, and it's sort of increasing speed. So the speed of change is increasing rapidly. And then when we go back to this decision making, all these people, individual consumers, businesses, and cities, they have to make decisions for future now, and they have to understand all of this. And this is one of the key questions we are trying to help them see all these alternative futures and how you can sort of choose the right one for you. And if something happens and it isn't the right way, then you can turn your strategy immediately and be agile in developing things.
It's nice you mentioned this, Peter, because I'd like to, throw in a question. Now, many cities, they have plans or have started many actions towards, let's say, urban renewal, sustainability being at the core. Now, naturally, they have not necessarily planned for pandemics like we're experiencing right now. And I'm sure that, along the years, we will have many unplanned, uncertain events, positive or negative, impacting cities. So when we get, or when we, let's say, help cities make longer term choices and see alternative futures and stuff, how do we deal with, such pandemics or issues coming out? And how can they impact, or will they change the sustainability goals after that?
Well, whenever pandemics or other crises happen, then it's very likely that you make panic decisions. You see one problem and you try to fix it immediately, and then you have a partial solution that will create huge problems later on. So if you think of dealing with unexpected things, you can do it beforehand. So make sure that your city is as resilient as possible and buffered against certain things. Or you can try to pick up the pieces afterwards. So then whatever happens, you sort of rise from the ashes like a phoenix bird. Or then you can be agile in the middle of everything and try to do decisions. And this is the difficult part, because then there are lots of things you have to do, and you might do things that are going to kick you on your behind later on. And this means that you have to take all of these things together, and especially in these crisis situations, then you need all these stakeholder groups, and you need to understand value creation for several players. And usually this is sort of territory that hasn't been walked before, and it means communication tools, it needs modeling, it needs management flight simulator showing what kind of impact you create for different stakeholders. And sustainability is important. And when you think of sustainability, the green values are, of course, key elements. But then there's social and political and economic and many other. If you only stick to the three ones, then you forget the politics. But social and economic. All of these have to be sort of work together, and if you only aim for carbon neutrality at the price of carbon neutrality, then you have to sort of see that this might have problems. So if you want to have holistic solution, then all of these have to take into consideration.
Yeah, that's very good. And I know that we have a wonderful solution at VTT called CityTune. We'll be sharing the URL in the end. So please do look it up, or just, do a simple search on your favorite search engine or video sharing site, VTT CityTune, and you'll find lots of great things which are happening. Now, we're heading towards the end, but I'd like to take a very quick question from both of you. So very short answers, please. What type of city would you be living in 20 years' time? Pekka.
Well, it's something where it's basically nice to live. Where when you step out of the door, you're already in a nice neighborhood where there's things to do, places to see, where you can go around easily, and you don't have to sit in the traffic.
Peter.
Okay, I'm very urban, so I like to live in city center, and I would like it to be green. I would like it to be financially sound. There are services everywhere around, and there's nature around, and there are new ways of doing things. How you do working, how do you do sort of shopping, and these kind of things. So this is in very short.
Very good. And we have, a last comment in, and it's that, as individuals, the first steps we take in life are like walking, interacting with people and stuff. And maybe in the future, we would be heading towards smart use of personal time optimization and have localized hubs, where people can actually interact and make wonderful things happen. Thank you very much to all of you who have joined us today. Um, we will be sharing a URL at the end, so please do look us up at vttresearch.com and then just search for CityTune. And just to let you know, next week we will be having another VTT Sip of Science focusing on a new mobile application for COVID-19 developed in Finland, and we will be talking about its security and trust and how we hope it will make everyday life easy for us. Thank you very much. Enjoy your coffee. It was a pleasure hosting you. And some other colleagues of ours will join you next week. Goodbye.